Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Becker, Dean of the School of the Arts, and welcome to the Lenfest Center for the Arts. And special night with Tania Bruguera. We were so thrilled to have her here. And so I always start with our land acknowledgement, so I'm going to do that first. So Columbia University School of the Arts recognizes Manhattan as part of the ancestral and traditional homeland of the Lenni, Lenape, and Wappinger people. And we continue to address issues of exclusion and erasure and systemic discrimination through ongoing education and a commitment to equitable representation. I want to also say that we have co-sponsors tonight, the Institute for Latin American Studies, the Miriam and Ira D. Wallach Art Gallery, Betti-Sue's going to come up soon, the School of the Arts Visual Art Program. It's really my pleasure. I just get to introduce Betti-Sue, who's going to introduce Tania, but to introduce my colleague Betti-Sue Hertz, who's the director and chief curator at Columbia University's Wallach Art Gallery since 2019. We're so thrilled to have her. Her curatorial and scholarly work focuses on the intersection of critical visual culture, transnational exchange, and socially relevant issues. So she was a perfect person to come and be with us at the Lenfest Center. Trained as an artist and an art historian, she's committed to the ideals of freedom of expression and the liberatory potential of the convergence of art and politics. She was the director of the visual arts at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in California from 2008 to 2015. And she was curator of contemporary art at San Diego Museum of Art from 2000-2008, and director at Longwood Arts Project in the South Bronx from 1992 to 1998. So coming back here was coming home. And she's taught social art history and theory courses at Stanford, San Francisco Art Institute, and at UC Berkeley. And she was active in the 1990s Cuban art scene and conducted tours of the Havana Biennales for US curators, artists, and gallerists that culminated in co-directing a major cultural exchange and exhibition program for 5 artists from the island, including Tania Bruguera. And these artists were then in residence, each in a different US city. It was a really big deal to do that at that time. And so it's very fitting that Betti-Sue Hertz will get to introduce Tania tonight. So Betti-Sue.
Thank you, Carol. It's just such a pleasure to be working with you these past 3 years, even though we were kept apart by the pandemic. We are so grateful to the staff of the Lenfest Center for the Arts and the Wallach Art Gallery for their work to assure the success of this lecture. A special thank you to Julia Hahn, Calder Singer, Jennifer Mock, and Zachary Valdez. It is an honor to introduce the celebrated artist, Tania Bruguera, who has shown that through creativity, activism, collectivism, and persistence, art can change perceptions and also address policies head-on. She has been an inspiration to artists globally and significantly a young generation of Cuban artists. Her most recent project, INSTAR, Instituto de Arte Visual, Hannah Arendt, founded in 2015, is represented along with works by a young generation of artists in our current exhibition at the Wallach Art Gallery, Sin Autorización, Contemporary Cuban Art, on view until January 15. And it's curated by Gwen Unger and Abel Gonzalez Fernandez, who are here with us. I want to just thank them both. I've known Tania since 1994 and was lucky to be in Havana when she presented her work and performances there in 1994, 97, and 2000 during the Havana biennials. In addition, as Carol has mentioned, she was a participant in a program that I co-organized with Holly Block, who passed away several years ago, but was very important to making sure that there was strong communication and relationships between American artists and Cuban artists. And we worked together throughout the 90s to support those efforts. An ardent advocate of freedom of expression and immigrant rights and human rights more broadly, Tania has become an icon of the quintessential political artist. Her art has taken many forms, from her early work in performance, in part inspired by the work of the Cuban exile artist Ana Mendieta, including a decade-long series of reenactments of the Zuleta series, the Underground Journal, Post-War Memory, that the government shut down. I remember that. And her leadership in various alternative schools and collective artistic actions. Founding Instar in 2015, she transformed her house in Havana into a think tank, a do tank, a wish tank. This year, Instar, part school, part performance and art collective, and part political activist group that fosters civic literacy and policy change, presented a stunning installation and program at Documenta in Kassel in Germany. Some of us had the pleasure to see that presentation. An example of her previous projects includes her collaboration with the Queens Museum of Art and Creative Time, Immigrant Movement International, thank you, Tom, for working with Tania on that, where she set up a social service agency serving primarily Latin American immigrants in Corona, Queens, as well as virtual global events as a 5-year experiment beginning in 2011 in putting art into action. In Tatlin's Whisper, number 5, 2008, visitors to Turbine Hall at the Tate Modern were confronted with mounted police who put them through crowd control exercises. We tried to get that project, remember, when we tried to get that when I was at YBCA, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco, we could not find a black horse and a white horse. It was really important to that project, but we almost did it. And later, you had a solo show at YBCA with Lucia San Roman. For Tatlin's Whisper number 6, presented at the 10th Havana Biennial in 2009, she set up a microphone in the Wilfredo Lam Center of Contemporary Art and invited her audience to speak. A white dove was placed on each speaker's shoulder in allusion to the one that landed on Fidel Castro during his first speech in Havana after the triumph of the 1959 revolution. And it was widely discussed, and it was shut down, and all kinds of things happened. She invented the term art utile, or useful art, which really folds into her belief that art can actually make policy change and change the way governments relate to civil rights and social justice. Underlying all her work is the foregrounding of artist agency against repressive and discriminatory systems, inclusive of the importance of the artist's body and creative output as a weapon against tyranny. Over the years, Tania has been detained and interrogated by the Cuban authorities and has been subject to long periods of house arrest. It is not without a personal toll that she has continued fighting for social justice. Her work has been shown extensively around the world, including solo exhibitions at the Museo Nacional de Bellas Artes in Havana, Tate Modern, Van Abbe Museum, and YBCA. She received a Guggenheim Fellowship in 1998 and has been included in numerous biennials, including the 23rd Sao Paulo Biennial, the 49th Venice Biennale, curated by the pioneer of contemporary curating, Harold Zeman, and the 2004 Shanghai Biennial. She has been shortlisted for the Hugo Boss Prize and the Index on Censorship's Freedom of Expression Award. Her clashes with the Cuban government culminated in 2021 when she agreed to leave Cuba to assume the position of senior lecturer in media and performance at Harvard, where she still is, in exchange for the release of 25 political prisoners. Tania, I have been an admirer of your work for a very long time. Your vision and tenacity are extraordinary. I know there have been really rough times to bear, and that you have suffered physically and emotionally, especially at the hands of the Cuban government. But in spite of the struggle, you have persisted, and like others around the world fighting for justice, your heroism will continue to inspire others. So thank you so much. And with that, I would like to have Tania come up and present. Thank you.
Sorry. Um, I do a lot of talks, but this one I'm very nervous about because I have two of the most important people in my life, three if we count Tom. And I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me. These two women here changed my life. Betti-Sue with Holy Block invited me in the 90s to come here. And I remember I was very pissed off because I wanted to come to New York and you guys put me in Chicago. I'm like, what is Chicago? Just what's happening there? And then it actually was the best place to be because the most smart people, very committed politically, very socially engaged processes were happening there in a very quiet but very strong way. And that actually shaped me also. So thank you so much for that invitation that changed my life, to you and to Holly. And thanks to you, because I applied for the school, and then I got the school, and you were a mentor over all the time I was there, and I can always go and knock at your door. I still do. So thank you for that, for being a friend all these years. So, bueno. I just want to say that I'm going to show some images that are a little intense, so I apologize in advance. Some images are a little strong, so. I'm going to talk specifically about the project in Documenta. It's the first time I do it, so I don't know exactly how to talk about it yet. So hopefully with your questions I can clarify some stuff. So, I did a project in 2014 when Obama and Raul decided to secretly meet and decide that they were going to be friends after they were the enemies. And everybody was in shock. My only question was, does that mean we're going to have democracy now? So then I decided to put that at test. So basically, I told people, and it was a collective project. At that time, my other collaborators didn't want to be known because they were afraid. But now, after time, they are okay. So this project was done with Valia Garzón, Miguel Hidalgo, my sister Deborah, and Clara Ciazarán. So we set up this, I think it's one of, I don't want to say it's the first, but it's one of the first internet projects in the arts in Cuba because everything was done through Facebook that years later became a very activist site. So basically we said the 30th of December at 3 o'clock, we're going to put the microphone on the Revolution Square. Anybody can say what they want, respectfully of others, but for 1 minute. That ended really badly. 87 people got in prison. People who didn't know who I was were, I remember una dama de blanco, a lady in white activist, who was going to buy something like food, and they took her, and she said, who's Tania Bruguera? She couldn't even pronounce my name. So, yeah, so it was very confusing. And I think one of the good policies of the Cuban government is to be preemptive. They are very, they always do preemptive actions, preemptive law. You can also go to jail because they think you might do something. So it's a kind of Minority Report life that we live there sometime. So, and I wanted to stop in this image because I think the people who were there, they saw four very distinctive group of people. I thought nobody was going there. I mean, it's a very big place, so of course, if anybody goes, it looks empty, but it was quite a bit. There were quite four distinctive groups. One was the activist. The second one was the press. The third one was the Cuban security forces dressed as people. And the fourth one was curious people, like, what's going on right now? So I think that defined the politics in Cuba, basically, and the responsible groups. So after that, I went through a lot of interrogation sessions and so on. And I remember distinctively in one of the interrogation sessions that the piece is called Tattling Whisper. So my interrogator went to Wikipedia and knew by heart the first paragraph of Wikipedia defining who tattling is. And it was so ridiculous. I was in the middle. I mean, now it's easy to say, at the moment it was different, but she was saying, Tattling, 1850, the architect, revolutionary, like it was so like performative that I say, oh my God, this is a pedagogical moment. So I decided after that, because we had to meet like every week 1 or 2 times. I mean, it was very chaotic the way they do it. So I say, okay, since she has to know about that, about tattling, to talk about my work, I'm going to do another performance that she has to know about in order to interrogate me. So I decided to read Hannah Arendt, The Origin of Totalitarianism, with the hope that she read at least one paragraph and that we had that discussion on the next interrogation session. Of course, she didn't get it, but we tried. So basically, then I started working with Hannah Arendt. Is somebody I have admired over the years. I came across her work by chance in Spain. I saw a book that's called The Promise of Politics. I said, oh, that's a beautiful title. And then I bought the book and I loved it. And now I'm a fan. So we decided that it was impossible to change policy only with one action. And I've been a big advocate for a long time of work that are long-term. So then I decided not to have just one encounter with them or one pedagogical moment, but to actually create a structure, a para-institution. And what I mean by para-institution, of course, it's an institutional critique, but from the positive side. I'm not interested in saying you're doing this wrong. They know they're doing it wrong. They're pretending not to know, but they know. So what I want is to prove, especially in Cuba, that things can be done, even if they say it's impossible, even if we think it's not going to happen. So this is why I created Instituto de Activismo Hannah Arendt. Activism, of course, is between art and activism. And it is the second part of the Cátedra de Conducta, which is a project I did a long time ago, also an educational parallel system. Here, I was, of course, we can see this is the place that we live. The environment is very important. Everything happens in the house, in my house, which many things has happened there. Basically, I understood that in order to create art and activism in Cuba, I mean, first of all, it was very difficult because the activists themselves didn't want artists because they didn't get, what are you doing? You're not serious, like, you know. So it was quite hard for them to understand after the fact what we were doing and how powerful art can be. And I think now some activists are actually using some of the tools we use in art to bring their message across. So basically, that's the house. We had a lot of illusion with this house. We even prepared spaces for co-working, for activists who have no space, safe space to be, etc. We started by inviting people like Steve Kurtz and Critical Ensemble, Brian Holmes, Claire Pentecost, Olga and Olga and Gregory, to come and share with us their experience in art and activist. Then after that, we went into other areas, like, for example, now that the people were having more knowledge of what other people do in other countries, we start to create things about Cuba. And then it was a moment after 5 years, almost 7 years of project, I was called by the people in Documenta and to present an artwork. They wanted something else, and I wanted Instar. And then they say, okay, Instar. And then basically, it was quite interesting. I think Rangrupa has been an amazing experience for me as curators because they do curate in a very different way. For example, normally you talk to the curator, which is one person, they are a group. No. What they did is they created WhatsApp groups, like activists. And we spent 2 years communicating on WhatsApp. Yes, it's crazy. Like, you don't, if you don't see it in 1 hour, you have 200, messages. But it was a beautiful process because we were people from so many different places. The pandemic didn't allow us to meet personally, so we were talking about our projects. We were supporting people in Colombia when they were doing demonstration. They actually supported our project, Instar. And so it was quite beautiful because when we actually, the way we understood Documenta was through collaborating. It was not an order that was given to us to do something. Like, we were collaborating, and some of the ideas that we gave the team actually happened. So it was a very, very beautiful process. And of course, it was super beautiful to not be with the norm. There were people, not many people knew. I knew some of the guests, but there were many new people there, which is great. So then I was saying, I had 2 challenges. The first challenge was, how do I, no se ve. Sí se ve. So how do I, no, it's not seen. Bueno, how do we do how do we do this event where we have so many things happening in Star? We had an editorial, like a press. We have workshops. We have an archive. We have started with the oral history that activists and other people have done. Like, we have so much work. And I didn't know, the first challenge is like, how do we show all of this to people who don't understand the context, who will be, not engaged on that. So that's okay, don't worry. No, don't worry, it's okay. So you can go to a website, that's the website. And I wanted to go through it, but it's, so you can go to all the events. It's a lot. We have a really robust archive of the history of activism in Cuba that doesn't start today, it started in the 60s. So I think that also was very important because first Instar was a place like a school, then it transformed in an archive to create a history, because part of what happened with the activists in Cuba is they all think they invented hot water, we say in Cuba. And actually, part of that fragmentation, the government always push you to leave or put you in jail. So the fact that you didn't know you had a history didn't allow you to be proud of where you come from. So I think this is another thing that we have done in Instar, creating a kind of history of the practice. And in the last stages before going to Documenta, we actually became, in a way, like an umbrella. And because we were protected by people knowing me outside and so on, a lot of other independent projects were through Instar either having prizes or being supported to produce new films or do the events in our space and so on. Of course, the part that I loved the most about being invited at Documenta was that the guy, Mario is his name, one of the guys that is in charge of me for the secret police, went one day to pick me up in his car. I didn't want to go, but that's his version. And then I have to go. And then he say, Tania, tell me the truth. Don't you think Documenta is part of CIA project? And I was like, well, at the beginning, there was some history but no, I don't think they invite Ron Grupa for CIA. No, I don't think so. So they're obsessed with that. And I said to him, actually, it would be awesome if you said that on national TV. Because they say everything on national TV. Like, all of us have been in national TV so much, but the wrong way, right? So I say, please say that in national TV. So that stopped him. Yeah. So basically, the first challenge is that how do you put in an exhibition that is 90 days, an experience of 7 years that is social, is political, is out of context, is basically energy, because art is energy. How do you reproduce that? The second challenge was the fact that people see Cuba as this beautiful paradise where all the amazing social justice has been solved. Everybody is happy. And it was very hard to challenge 60 years of propaganda, basically. And people don't see these images. And again, I say sorry because I said I'm going to put some intense images. People don't see these images of people not taking care in hospitals. People see this, but they forget there is prostitution in Cuba that has been supported by the government. Remember, please, that Fidel said once, we have the most educated prostitutes in the world. And people see, they think the sun is beautiful, there is music everywhere, but they don't see this. They turn their face when there is a guy that has nothing to eat, that is homeless. And of course, we see these beautiful images in all the, pamphlets and to go, but people don't go to these places. This is near my house in Havana. And in Cuba, we have, every time it rains, people get very nervous because we know it's going to be one building that is going to fall because they're not being taken care of. I'm going to apologize because the next image is very strong. They also don't see this. These are people who died in a psychiatric hospital without attention. So, of course, it's very hard to explain people things like this.
¡Arriba, pueblo! ¡Arriba, revolución! ¡Viva la revolución cubana! ¡Viva la revolución cubana!
So basically, this is one day we went to one of our friends' house, Luis Manuel Otero, who is still in prison today. And these people were having fun. And all of a sudden, one of the secret police saw us and say, "Come on, revolutionaries." And that was a sign to go on us, beat us, and take us against our will and put us in this police cars.
Esta es una situación sanitaria, usted lo sabe muy bien, esta es una cuestión política. Aquí hay personas en huelga de hambre hace días. ¿Qué situación sanitaria de qué? Y ustedes han estado diciendo que hay COVID en esta cuadra hace semanas. Entonces, ¿cuál es la situación sanitaria?
Por favor, no queremos usar la fuerza.
Si la quieren usar,
La han usado.
si no nos tuvieran ahí.
Ya no me entonces no nos va a quedar otra alternativa. Ustedes deciden.
One house,
No, deciden ustedes.
defending the freedom of another.
El mundo ha decidido él.
¿Van a cumplir?
So this is the environment we live in. This is the thing we have to react as artists in Cuba. I don't know how to show that in Germany, when actually sometimes they don't even want to remember there was the DDR.
Pero la orden de combate está a la calle los revolucionarios.
What happened is 11th of July, people went in the street because they could not have it anymore. People didn't say down the embargo. People say we want freedom, get out of power. Of course, the guy who you saw at the beginning who said the order of combat is given is the president of Cuba, somebody nobody respects. And basically what he's saying that was, here you have permission to go to the street with these sticks and do whatever you want to people because you will be protected, because you are the revolutionaries. And this is what happened. In one day, Cuba had 1,500 plus political prisoners, more than Venezuela and Nicaragua together, and it was the second country in the world with political prisoners. Right now, what is happening is that some of them, because the big pressure of all the activists, especially a group called Justice 11J, they have been doing a lot of work and with the UN and all these organizations, and now many of them are being in their house under arrest or waiting, for their sentence. That day is when Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara got taken by the police. He spent almost a year without sentencing, and now he has been sentenced to 5 years. So that's the context in which we're going to do Documenta. That was quite a challenge. Then the other thing that was clear for us at Instar was that Instar could not stop, because if we stop that space we give them. So I decided, together with the team in Instar, that they will keep working, and I will look for collaborators to work only in the project of Documenta. And those were Clara Ciazaran, who worked with us before, and Ernesto Rosa. So basically, when we were discussing, we decided to use Documenta, because Documenta is a big platform. And for 60 years plus, the Cuban government has been calling artists non-artists if they decide to do work that is critical, or they have decided to, let's say, make paper, the books they print of somebody who has been critical, or eliminate the films of the people who have been critical. So we decided to use Documenta as a platform to show the work of artists that have been censored and eliminated. One thing that was very shocking to me when we did the list, there were more than 260 artists. I thought there was less people, but we start asking people from different areas like theater, film. So we also decided to not only rescue the work of people like Carlos Rodriguez Cárdenas, who did this mural. We had 2 murals. Carlos Rodriguez Cárdenas mural. It says "Ways of March Ahead." And it's quite funny because the guy is a normal guy, and then it becomes like less and less elements of the body, and it's tumble. And then we had also the work of Hamle La Bastida. Ironically, we actually commissioned him the work before he went to Cuba. And he said, "Oh, I'm doing these drawings on," and his work is here, so you can see it. I'm doing these drawings on the prisons in Cuba that had political prisoners. And we say, "Okay, we want you to do only one because there are so many. So why don't you do Villa Marista?" And ironically enough, that's where he was detained for 3 months later. But this is his work. It's very beautiful, but that's the floor plan of the place he was held for 3 months. Then we decided that we also wanted to have different formats for exhibition, not only the public space that is being reproduced, but we wanted to have different formats. And one format was posters. So we did a series of posters, 10 posters, that were announcing the exhibitions, but at the same time were showing work that was censored over the years. And this beautiful design is done by Claudia Patricia, who is the designer at Instar. And her work is also here in the exhibition. So basically, we saw the work there of in different moments. This is Chau Armada. This is Antonia Riz, Thomas Hesson, Humberto, sí, estoy hoy. ¿Cómo se llama? Sí, Ezequiel Suárez. Yeah. So we have all these artists who have been censored. Tomás Sánchez. This is one of the work that was actually destroyed by the government because he was doing yoga. So that was very threatening for the revolution. This is the work of Art D, a group that was one of the few groups that did real political work in the streets in the 80s. and Joel Rojas. Because of this painting, he was expelled from the University of the Arts. And bueno, in my piece, where I read Hannah Arendt, which ironically, the way they censor it was to bring this hack jammer, so the sound was competing with the sound of the reading. Quite smart, I think. Yeah. So basically, we did a space in the middle. We had 3 spaces. We did a space in the middle where we did an archive, sort of an archive. And this archive was like a space that was designed by Orosa. This is something he does in his research about Cuban popular ways to construct. And then we did this mask of all the most known dissident artists who have been censored. We also have some images on the back of Lazarito, which is an outsider artist who is fascinated with the news, so he does all these small TVs. And also we had the list of all the, it's not complete, but the list of censored artists. Then very quickly, I'm going to go through some of the shows. There are 10 shows, it's a lot. The other thing that I realized entering Documenta was that I could not have a stable aesthetics. I needed an unstable aesthetic. And that was reflected by the idea that things change every 10 days, because I wanted people to feel how we felt. We felt insecure, we felt that we're missing something, we felt nothing is complete, like this uneasiness that you can be preparing for something and then the next day they have a new law against whatever, and then you have to change everything and the work of 3 months is erased. So we wanted to reflect that somehow in the form of the exhibition. I know some people didn't like it because they didn't see everything, but the whole point was precisely to make people aware that they don't know the full story. That was a metaphoric gesture to tell people you don't know the whole story. And you will never know the whole story. So basically, so that's what we did. We started with Factografía Operativa, which is the name of the whole project. You know factography very well. We wanted to use this idea of the archive as well. For us, all of the shows are almost like drawers from our archive. And we were we say, how can we tell the story of Cuba and Cuban censored art? Yes, we can show the work of the people. Some of the work is lost, like the mural that you saw with the Carlos Cárdenas had to be reproduced because it's lost. It was painted over. But we say, we don't want like photos, videos, this kind of documentation. So we wanted to translate it in another way. So basically we did pieces like this. We had 3 rooms. The one in the middle is the archive. And then we have two on the side. When one exhibition was happening, the other one was being done. It was a little crazy. So we had 10 days. And when these 10 days end, we see the 3 pieces. This one closed. We show this one, and this one is changing again. I will show you later, because one thing we did is we recycle a lot of things between one another as a way to have a unifying feeling. So basically, this piece has many pieces in it. And it has, one of the things that was very important is that we collaborated with other groups. In this case, we collaborated with El Toque and with Inventario. Inventario is a citizen journalism using data. And it's very important because it's the only source to know what's going on in Cuba. When they cut the internet to the activists, they immediately call people to see who was cut, how many hours. So they're quite serious. So we put on the floor the map of Cuba, where people were asked not to have shoes, and they have this kind of... And in this map, we have all the places where July 11 people were demonstrating. We also have the work of Rachel Carrion, and that was quite interesting that many of the things that we use for this exhibition were taken out of the internet. So we wanted to acknowledge internet, but we didn't want to have any computer, basically. So we wanted to acknowledge the role of internet. And for example, these drawings were done by Rachel, and he posted in his Facebook page every time as a reaction of things that happen, but we wanted the originals. And also we printed all the campaigns, political campaigns Instar has done over the years. We had, for example, the work of Camila Lobon, who's also in the show. And I have to say I forgot to thank Abelito and Gwen for the show and the opportunity to be here, sorry. But it's very special, thanks. So basically, we also brought the originals of things that are circulated on the internet, like this drawing by Camila Lobon that was used as one of the most iconic images of the struggle. We also show the No to the Havana Biennial. We are not against the Havana Biennial. Like, I'm a daughter of the Havana Biennial. I've been so much in it and so much out of it. But we thought it was whitewashing the image of Cuba, having 12 artists in prison at the moment they announced the Havana Biennial. Like, nothing is happening, and all of you, like naive Americans who love Cuba, will go there and forget that there were 12 artists in prison. So it was a beautiful coalition in which a lot of people worked, también tú. So Cubans from inside and outside the island work on the project. And it was fantastic. We had 700 signatures of very important visual artists in the world who say no to the Havana Biennial. And I think we won that one. We have won several ones, I have to say. And then also we had these big drawings of Rachel that are so beautiful because they are so, I don't know, so unexpected and so, yeah, like the situation in Cuba. So we also wanted to show all the posters that people did for the internet there, you know. We show also images of when they took the artwork of Luis Manuel when he was in prison. Like, we took some videos just to show what was running on the internet that people saw. Then on that same space, 10 days later, you had this. So we kept the carpet, and you had this, which was a beautiful, curated by Aparicio, José Luis Aparicio, a very important young filmmaker. He curated more than 100 films session from the 60s to now. Some of them have never been seen. Some of them for 40 years, nobody knew what they were. And there were many of them censored. Other ones are not censored, but they circulated among the friends. One thing I wanted to also prove, I had a friend from Chicago who say, I was telling him the idea I had for the show. I say, why do you want so much? And I say, the problem is the Cuban government is used to discredit people. They are very good at that. If I bring, let's say, 3 or 4 artists, they will say one is a child molester, the other one is a prostitute, the other one is drunk. So it's very easy. So I needed, first of all, to make their job harder. And secondly, I wanted to prove that independent art movement is not 2 or 3 crazy people in Cuba. I wanted to show how much and how many of us and the amazing track that we have as artists and how united we are in different areas. That's why we use visual arts, but also we use cinema. And we also, and it's called Tierra de Nadie. Also, we did several homages. We homage a few groups. We homage Galería Aglutinador, who is the first independent art space in Cuba. And we did it by bringing the work that originated. The whole gallery started because this work was censored, and they say, you know, I'm not taking it out of the show. Let's go home. We invite friends over, and that's it. That's how we. So I actually had hold on the censor work. We had to buy it because we didn't want any private collector or anything related. And the work of Sandra Ceballo, an amazing artist and you know, mobilizer. we had another challenge. How do we show 27 years of work? And they don't have good documentation, to be honest, because it's energy. You just have a good time and so on. So we decided to print all the photos they had and put it all together like this. So it was beautiful because you had to go very physical. You had to go over it to look. And the more you see, the more years, the more heavy it was. So I think it was quite nice. And we also used one of the declaration of Sandra, say curators go home. I think it was perfect for Documenta, especially that one. So yes, we did the homage to these early people who were independent, who had to go through a lot of things to do what they do. Another homage we did was to La Peña del Júcaro, who is a space in Camagüey. We also wanted to show things are not only in Havana. And this was created by Hochi, who's here. And this is the same space. So what we did is we cut the space 1 meter tall, and we recreated this kind of garden. And this was specifically about all the independent print, press, and writing. Yeah. Liber? Yeah. We reproduced the place of aglutinador 1-on-1. So this is the exact size of the place. And this became, but this is not exactly the garden of Júcaro, but then we use it with that. Yeah. So then, I have very few minutes, so I have to go around. So we did also an homage to Art Brut, which is a project that has been for many years helping outside the artist. And this show was interesting because we combined the work of outside the artist with the work of Alberto Casado, who is somebody who has been painting, and you had it in the show in the 90s, who have been painting what we call it chismografía artística, which is like gossiping in the arts, but he makes it painting. So all the things that happen in the art and this is, for example, the same photo we have of Ángel Delgado, but painted. And then we have also civic practices. It was very important to show that Cuba had civic practices for a long time. We invited Neto Leal to do this beautiful drawing of the space. It's the space of one of the original galleries where people in the 80s were meeting inside the space of Documenta. This is the ceiling. And that one was curated by, we invited, not all of the things were curated by Clara, Ernesto, and I. We invited for somebody, some of them, other people, like in this case was Jan Moreno and Natalia Zuluaga. And then we did, by the end, music. So this is Festival Rotilla, who was censored. And this is an intense case because the Cuban government even took the name of this event. This is an amazing project that lasted around 10 years, and there were thousands of young people going to the beach to dance techno music and so on, but they were afraid of so many young people together, basically. And then this is the last piece we did, is Instar, and basically I did a project that in a way is an homage to Hans Hake. You remember his piece in Venice, and it was my response to all the non-discussion that happened in Documenta. I was quite upset because the discussion never happened, and I was waiting for that space to serve as the discussion space. So that was my answer to the piece. So basically, you entered this room, and also I wanted to cite the original piece that gave way to Instar. So I basically, you give one page of Eichmann in Jerusalem to people entering the space. And then you were told, you go in, you go on the floor and read. So while that happened, when the person comes, then you have these people working with the hack jammer very intensely, and the body felt that. Then you say, okay, I saw it, okay, you spend whatever minutes, and then you go out, and the exit is another room with the exact same thing. And that happens 3 times. So it is this idea of, you get it. I don't have to explain it. So I think that was the piece I did. Another thing that was very important, Olga and Gregory also were part of that. It was important to show that Instar was a space for discussion. So we had a lot of public events, workshops, of different kinds, presentations, discussions with artists. The spaces were activated in different ways. In this case, this is Greg's workshop, conversation. People also were creative with the work. This is one of the masks. And I think it was great because we wanted some interactivity, but not too much fun, So it was a delicate line there. And this is an example of some of the work and some of the things we have to deal with. Che Guevara is a very loved figure, very useful for the left-wing international. But this is actually something that happened. He went in Algeria to the embassy, and all of a sudden he saw the work of Virgilio Piñera, who was a censor artist and gay. And he said, what does this faggot does here? And he takes the book and throws it away. So basically, this is what we did. We did all of this, and we actually brought 348 people who actually showed the reality of Cuba. We were using the public space as another exhibition space. We consider all the public events an exhibition, and we wanted through that to show the reality of Cuba and giving the context that people didn't have. I have to say that Documenta went really well for Instar. We got really good reviews. We had amazing outcomes out of it. But it's as much as you do as an artist for your peers, for the people who are fighting along your side, what always happens is that you stay with this that I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what I feel right now, which is actually reflected in this clip that was on the internet of the Minister of Culture in Cuba slapping an artist to take their phone because it was recording. And this is a moment in which the Minister of Culture, after a lot of pressure, decided to meet the artists. But when the artists arrived, some of us were in jail, like were detained or in the house or in prison, and the Minister of Culture was surrounded by the military. And one of the things you're going to hear, if you don't speak Spanish, is Michael Osorbo, who now is in prison, saying, why do we have to go in if there is all the police outside with guns? So basically, they were asking for that. And the sound you're going to hear at the end is the sound that was secretly recorded inside the bus in which all the artists were detained. What was important about this is that Minister of Culture has negated over and over that Cuban artists have been in prison, that they have been abused by the police. Now he not only witnessed it, but he gave the order, because with that sign, immediately the police understood that was the sign to come in and grab the artist. And we, in this project of 27N, which is a project we'll talk later maybe, that happened in Cuba, where all the artists went to the Ministry of Culture to demand for change. Actually, after this happened, we went through all the legal ways in which you can take somebody out of their post. And not only the National Assembly laughed at us, not only they ignore all the signatures, thousands of signatures that we collected, but the President of Cuba in public supported that minister, who actually today is still the Minister of Culture.
Oye, ¿qué pasó?
That's the Minister of Culture.
Lo que no me da la gana, no hable más. Pues ahí, vas a hablar, habla. ¡Habla! No hable más.
This is the Cuba we have today. Thank you very much. Well, I still have 3 minutes. If anybody has a question or not. Oh, okay. Carol? Oh. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Tania, you've given so much of your life so far to this struggle. What do you see happening now? Do you see anything shifting? How do you understand it at this moment, I guess?
Well, it's a bittersweet moment because we are suffering the non-solidarity of the left. And at least, I don't want to classify people's political views, but many of the artists, the 27N and all these groups that we are part of are very diverse, but we tend, let's say, in general, the groups to the left, but we feel completely isolated by international left because they discredit our personal stories. They don't go with us. They don't accompany us. For example, I have I'm friends with one of the original organizers of Black Lives Matter. And sometimes I say, hey, all the black people are being put in jail. The white people are expelled of the country. The black are in jail. There have been 3 black poor people who have been killed by the police from the back. Can you do something? Can you guys do a tweet? Nothing. So I think it's very hard because I understand that the Cuban government is a very good political operator. They play the long run. And we don't have many resources. But what I see right now is the situation. A lot of people thought it was bad because a lot of artists have left. Almost everybody in the arts have left, a lot of it. And people were like, oh, everybody left. And I think this is good because now the government is not dealing with artists. Now the government is dealing with the people. Because the artists left who were the one protesting. Now the mothers are protesting. The mother of the people in jail are protesting. The mother have no food, no. So I think this is, I feel that right now it's a very delicate moment. The people are very angry. Until very recently, every day you wake up to see one new protest. There was one town that spent 3 days surround themselves and the police could not enter in, And so there have been all of these situations, but the press is not talking about it. People don't know about it. So I think we are in a moment that we can propose something. I think a lot of the activists are proposing potential roadway to transition. And a lot of artists and activists are trying to take the position of politicians or people, speaking. So we'll see. I don't know. I can never predict anything in Cuba because they do everything under. And for sure, they are with the Russians. That is clear. 2 days before the Ukrainian war started, the second person in charge in Russia came to Cuba to meet with the Cuban president. And they forgave, I think, $100 million debt or something like that. And 2 days later, they attacked Ukraine. And of course, Cuba is one of the 3 or 4 countries in the United Nations who supports the war of Ukraine. So that's what is going on. So they have powerful allies. We don't have anybody. We are ourselves. And I'm very, very proud of the Cuban artists. And it's very beautiful because a few years ago, I was like crazy talking, oh, we have to do something. And now, I can step back because there are so many people working and doing what has to be done. It's very beautiful. See.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk. I recently read Art After Liberalism by Nicholas Gamzo, and thinking about Arendt's picking up power from the places where it lies in the street, I'm wondering how you see a path of solidarity for artists in like Sri Lanka or Nepal.
Yeah, I think Cuba is not the only place that's going through this. A lot of places in the world are going through different oppressions, and people don't hear so much about it in CNN or whatever. So I think there will be, I mean, we can talk later, but it will be great to have kind of a non-alliance group by activists. But I think one of the ways to help is to disseminate the information, to try to hear first-hand testimonies instead of propaganda, you know. And don't go to Cuba, please. There are other beautiful beaches in the world. Yeah. Thank you. And I have to say that being in Documenta was a very bittersweet situation, because here we are in the most important exhibition in the arts. We even won the prize. It was very good for us. It gave us protection. It was great. But it was hard, because you were seeing all these art people explaining. I think it was beautiful that everybody in Instar was coming and staying there for a month or two, and we were telling people what was happening. I think it was a great effort. And also I felt that many people who didn't know each other or haven't seen each other in a long time, or were fighting over political issues, actually gather in these public events, and that was very touching, that people were coming up with some hope, you know, to do stuff after that. But at the same time, I mean, I know I should not say that, but I mean, I was happy to be there. I was happy for the people working in START. I felt recognized. But at the same time, we are still in this conundrum that other political situations have been, artists in other political, which is, how can we do art when these other horrible things are happening, you know? So what is the role of art? What can we do with this? Like, how far can it go? And I felt at some point, I was talking with one of the artists, and I said, you know what? It's hard, I know it's hard, but at the same time, we are indexing a history through this. And now people know this happened at this time, because there are the drawings of Rachel, there are the mural of Hamlet, like all of this work is there as a registry of political events. So I don't feel completely good about it, but at least I always say that art survives any government, so that's our revenge. They can do whatever they want to our bodies today, but the memory of what happened that we're carrying through art will survive them, and people will always remember how ugly they were. Yeah.
So can you compare your experience? You've been in Documenta twice.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, you've said before that coming out of the last Documenta, you were quite upset, which is when you started the school in Cuba.
Yeah.
How about coming out of this, or maybe you haven't digested it yet, you're just back.
I'm in the process, yeah.
You're in the process. Is there something you take out versus the last Documenta?
No, it was interesting. Thank you for the question. It was interesting because when I was working with Ron Grupa, it was very special and very unique, the way they create, the process, going back and forth, all the information. It was very different than Okwi. And I didn't remember Okwi when I was in that process. And then as soon as I arrived to Documenta, to Kassel, and I started seeing the discrimination that was happening with the Indonesian curators, and with also trans people and other, Black people, it was quite intense, And I actually remember a lot Okwi, and I even did a post about it because I remember him so clearly, because I understood in a way that this Documenta carried the work he started. Because I think when he started doing that Documenta, many of us were not, the normal artists showing in Documenta. And I think in a way, I understood better Okwi because I felt like his mission in a way was, he might have many missions, but one mission was to put certain artists in an institutional situation that they cannot be taken out of there later. And I really, for the first time, thank him because I was like, wow, now I get it, 20 years later. And I felt like Rangrupa was doing the next step, which is not only we hear, but we're telling us how we define our world. And something I really enjoy is, at the same time, there were other shows in the world that people were paying attention to it, the Venice Biennial, the Berlin Biennial. One thing that I really appreciated in Documenta was that all of us, South Global, whatever they want to call it, were bringing our problems to Kassel. But we were not complaining. None of the artists were complaining in the artwork. Nobody was being victimized through the work. All of these people were bringing the work and showing how they solve their problems locally, and that was so beautiful. And I felt that the Germans had the opportunity to bring their local problem to the discussion, and they failed to do it, I don't want to say who failed and how they failed, but if it was a lost opportunity. So I thought a lot about Okwi when I was there, because also it was very hard. As soon as, like few months before it started, they were accused about many things, and they were going through a lot. So, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question. But actually, it's true. The first time I was in Documenta, I was frustrated that people spend 1 minute seeing the artwork, and that was it, and they get it. And after that, I went back to Cuba. I said, I'm going to do a slow art, So you have to spend a lot of time to see it, or you might never see it completely. So I went back and did the Cátedra de Conducta. This time, I'm still processing, because I'm processing two things at the same time. The Cuban political thing that is evolving, and this. But I know I'll bring something later, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Tania, muchas gracias.
No, de nada. I almost did it in Spanish, but not enough Spanish speakers.
Bueno, voy a hacer la pregunta en inglés, pero quería darte las gracias en español porque pues tu trabajo ha sido muy importante para mí y para muchas personas que trabajamos en el límite de la acción comunitaria, de la creación artística. Entonces, pues, verte en persona es muy importante. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
My question is, what are the possibilities for artists from the Global South that come from Cuba, Colombia, or other parts from the Global South, but are living actually in the Global North or in the States? What possibilities do we have as artists to support the movement in our own countries? How do you manage being here and there? And what could you recommend?
Bueno, this is one of the guilty aspects of being safe. When you are safe, you feel guilty because you survive. So this is something that happens also to activists and artists who are in this kind of practice. I feel that there are many ways to help, especially in the case of Cuba, also in other places. But in the case of Cuba, there have been a practice for the last maybe 40, 45 years, where if you don't live in the country, you are automatically discredited. So you are not Cuban artist because you don't live in the island. I think the internet has changed that. Even the way activism is happening, you have people who are outside and inside collaborating in a way that is very fluid and with no hierarchies. Because also before the internet and all of this, you feel like, if you are inside, you think people who are outside are more important than me. If you are outside, you think, people who are in Cuba are more legit than me. That doesn't happen anymore. So you have long-term relationship, activists and also artistic, that are happening very fluidly among artists. It is true that when you leave a place, you romanticize a place, you, imagine things different sizes, different experience, different feelings. But if you live in the global north, the first thing I would say is don't idealize your country. Don't make this kind of art that is about nostalgia, because nostalgia doesn't help change, you know. So try to I mean, the way many of us do it is we are engaged with our friends who are still there, and basically not having hierarchies, you know. You're not more important than somebody in Colombia because you're here in Colombia. But, and also the fact that everybody can learn from each other. I remember when I was doing the show at MoMA, one second, a Cuban guy came and said, oh, I feel so bad because I'm in, I don't know, Denmark, one of these progressive places in the north, the real north. I feel so bad because you guys are fighting and I'm there, I'm studying a PhD on whatever computer. I say, no, you're wrong. You need to graduate because we need you later, you know. So you always have to understand when you are needed, how you are needed, for what you are needed, and let the other person, like, you know what I mean? I mean, normally it's having a normal sense of things, but also to understand that you can give something other people don't have, and they can give something you don't have. So it's understanding what is missing and try to, I don't know. I mean, there are more things I can tell you, but very quickly, yeah. And in Cuba, it doesn't happen that much anymore, you know. And we have to have in consideration that we have only into the United States last year, 250,000 Cubans arrived to the US. Only last year. It's the biggest immigration wave that we had ever. And in other countries, there are people, I mean, there are people in Ukraine because they escaped because they didn't need visa, and then the war came, you know, and some of them joined the war, some of them escaped. So you have Cubans all over. So, and you have to understand when sometimes the help is to help them to live also. Because there are many people who are using people in those places and don't want them to leave because, you know, they can be useful to them or whatever. So everybody has their time, you know, so you have to understand that too, you know. And there will be a time to come back. Yeah, and together we'll do a beautiful country.
Hi, microphone. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm sure this is a question that you've gotten asked a lot, but it's something that I'm also thinking about right now. And I was wondering if you could talk more about the usefulness of art in politics and the category of art and what it can give.
Well, I have to confess something because you're a student, some of you. So when you're an artist, many times you put things very strong so people hear it. I don't think art alone can change any political system, but it can be a very good tool for people to understand things that are hard to visualize, to people to get into spaces where they can imagine all the realities that doesn't exist yet, and actually to deconstruct images that have been built by political structures. So I think art can be useful for social change. Art cannot be alone useful for social change. So I feel that art also have a beautiful quality to unite people and get people inspired to do things and thinking they can do it. Because many people say, oh, I don't know what I can do. And when you are in art and you learn how to, you know, make your ideas realized, is you know what I mean? So you can feel like, yeah, why not? Let me try. And it's okay to fail. Let's try again, you know? So I think it's also a tool for giving a lot of people confidence. And in Cuba, we see a lot, like a lot of artists did stuff online and so on. And a lot of people now are using those same, you know, devices. And let's not start talking about the memes They're the best art, contemporary political art ever. Yeah. I want to say that also part of what we wanted to prove, let's say, in this exhibition is that not only there is independent art in all the spheres in Cuba that is quite strong, but it's also a very strong independent academia in Cuba, because we invited, I don't know, like 35 academicians, like people who are doing PhDs, people who are doing like books in researches, who are quite important and quite different from the actual narrative of the government, and they're doing it from academia. So I think that was something that it was interesting to find out in the process. And we're doing 2 books that are coming out next year. One is a catalog of the project, and the other one is that is actually finished now. It's going to be the book of context, written only by Cuban people who are, professors or PhD students. So I think that was also very important.
Bueno, Tania, yo también te quiero agradecer. Bueno, como dijo mi compañero Juan Pablo por allá, parcero. Nada, pues también para mí es muy importante tenerte acá.
Gracias.
Siendo colombiana también, pues tú sabes que la parte política de Colombia también es muy fuerte, sobre todo que ahorita tenemos un nuevo presidente que es de izquierda, al fin después de 50 años de derecha, ultraderecha. Y yo sí te voy a preguntar en español porque...
Sí, lo traduzco.
El caso es que uno estando acá en Estados Unidos, uno cómo puede visibilizar la realidad del país de uno, no solo en los museos, como que termina siendo completamente para cierto tipo de gente, sino también llegarle a los del barrio, a los de la comunidad, que pues siendo así, entre más comunidad es más fuerte también el arte, ¿no? Porque lo que te digo, uno está en museos, pero no todo el mundo tiene acceso al museo, más que acá en este país normalmente los latinos trabajan todo el día y los museos se cierran a las 5 de la tarde y ellos salen de trabajar 11, 12 de la medianoche. Entonces sí me gustaría, pues como con tu experiencia, saber cómo llegarle a la gente de la comunidad de uno también para ayudar y moverse, ¿no?
Yeah.
Y, pues,
I'm going to translate very synthetically. But basically, I think you correct me if I'm wrong, or you correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, she's asking what to do, people like us who are in the U.S. to make visible, and also get through, communicate with the people in the barrio, that the community of immigrants are here. And also seeing that art is not something that is so much practiced, and also the museums, that's a very important point. The museum close at 6, and many of these people end work at 6. I think that's a really good question. I think first thing, we have to fight for the museums to open at 5, maybe. I mean, it's a dual struggle, because you have to demand things to the art world all the time, because the structures are not set up for the people in a barrio. And many of them actually are set up for tourists, not even people in the neighborhood. So I think you have to I say double battle, like constantly pushing the institutions to understand who they serve, how they can be useful, and how can they be civil institutions, not only cemeteries of work, in a way. But the other thing is that, in my personal experience, you cannot go to El Barrio, to somebody who sometimes don't even speak Spanish. Probably they speak, for example, Mayan, or they speak, Quechua, whatever, other indigenous languages, indigenous, regional languages. And they don't care about art, not because they don't love it, but because they haven't been presented with an art that includes them. So I think that happened with the immigrant movement, that we find out that many times, in a way, when people are presented with art, what they present first is the history of art. So if you don't get the history of art, you don't get it. So I think we need to go back to the origins of art, and try to show people why this is important. What do they give them, you know? And we had a beautiful experience in immigrant movement, you know, where people actually, after, I don't know, a few years, they start going to the Met and start going, and then, you know, and they liked it, but in a different way. It's not that they like it because they had to like it. It was because they start finding things there that, you know, they wanted to understand differently. So I don't know. I think you have to find a way in which art can be useful. I remember when I started immigrant movement, a politician told me, what is this for? Like, what is art for? And for this community, no? What are they doing with it? What is in art for them? Before thinking what is in them for you as an artist. Yeah. And see? Okay.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you so much, Tania. That was an amazing presentation. It really opened up so many questions that we didn't have a chance to ask you about InStar's project at Documenta. So many people were participating, and so many people saw it as well. So it's a model as well for, you know, some of the questions were, you know, let's use the work of Tania and InStar as a learning, as a way for us to sort of move forward in our own work to create political change and make sure that there's freedom of expression and that as many people as possible are making art and seeing art. So thank you all for coming. If you, yes, the show's closed right now, but if you haven't seen it, please come back and you can learn more about what Cuban artists are doing today. And thank you so much, Carol and Gavin and Jennifer and everybody who's here. So many people here who have been so supportive of the kind of work that Tania does. And it's a real community of people that you need to develop. Some of the other people who are asking questions. Develop a community. That community will last your whole life. Bye-bye.